All right, man, peace. So Paul George, the star small forward of the Oklahoma City Thunder, who recently re-signed with the team so that he can become confederate with his homeboy Russell Westbrook, has made a series of very revelatory statements in regards to the Golden State Warriors and how many of the other prominent players all across the NBA view the Golden State Warriors. That being that he believes that the only way that the Golden State Warriors can be defeated is by another super team. So what is Paul George really saying? Is he saying that the Oklahoma City Thunder are a super team? Or is he saying that he knows that he's not on a super team, so he signed there for comfort, knowing that there's no way that they can beat the Golden State Warriors? And that happens sometimes. Sometimes great athletes are in an era where they know that they have to compete against a transcendent team with transcendent players, and they just have no chance. So they just sit back and settle into their current situation and hope that the best team in their respective league has some type of serious injury to one of their prominent players, and that will be the only opening that they have. Other than that, they're content to just chill out and finish second or third. And Paul George's statements to me seem to confirm that sentiment. Well, anyway, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
All right, guys, let's get into some NBA. The Warriors created an extra super team and have won 3 of the last 4 championships while the rest of the NBA is just trying to catch up. Paul George was asked by the Washington Post if you can beat a super team without being a super team. Quote, "No team has won a title where one single guy was the lone star and it was their team. It's not that era. The best guy in our league right now couldn't do it. LeBron James got swept in the 2018 finals."
Well, here's what I'll say about Paul George's statements, or at least his initial statements. There has been a team that had just one lone star, and he was able to win the NBA championship, and that's Hakeem Olajuwon in 1994. Now, he would have been unable to repeat, in my view, had the Rockets not made that blockbuster trade for star guard Clyde Drexler. But that pretty much is the only team that I could think of that only had one star player in that era and was able to win a championship, because that was pretty much a quote-unquote interregnum period in between Jordan's 2 dynasties, the first three-peat and the second three-peat. And the Rockets had their non-perennial center, Hakeem Olajuwon, who was able to lead them to a world championship. And that's why I have Hakeem Olajuwon in my top 10 all-time greatest players. There's some people who will put him in the top 5. To be quite frank with you, you can make an argument of Hakeem Olajuwon over LeBron James. Right now, I have LeBron over Hakeem. It could go either way, but I mean, it is what it is. That's a video for another day. Point being is this: I think that Paul George tried to qualify his statements about a team not being able to win with just one star by saying, in this era, you can't do that. Because he probably thought to himself, maybe I'm forgetting someone. But I agree with him. In regards to this era, no. You cannot win a championship unless you have at least 3 great players on your team, or at least 2 great players and a very good player.
So that just goes to show you at this point what it takes to win, because you need guys that are alike talent-wise and skill set-wise to win championships. Max, I'll start with you. You agree with Paul on this?
Yep. 100%. And it's pretty much always been that way, but at least there have been times in the past, like when Jordan retired briefly, where Hakeem could do it as the only superstar on that team with a perfectly balanced team. But it's because he didn't go up against another super team, and even then it went 7 games, and they were kind of a little lucky to win that first championship.
Well, that series certainly could have went either way. That 1994 series between the Rockets and the Knicks, those were 2 very evenly matched teams, and the difference was Hakeem Olajuwon was just a level above Patrick Ewing. And that's the bottom line of it. Hakeem Olajuwon really made his legacy in those 2 NBA championship runs, because he established without a doubt that he was the second best player of that era behind Jordan. He was better than Barkley, he was better than Ewing, he was better than Malone, he was better than David Robinson. And for that time period, he was better than Shaq as well. So those 2 championship runs, Hakeem certainly made his name.
But Hakeem went back-to-back under those kind of circumstances without Jordan in the league. An 04 Pistons team, that's just the exception that proves the rule. So
well, right now we look at that 04 Pistons team as a starless team. But in 15 years, if this society is still around, who knows how we may view that team. Because they could potentially have 3 or 4 Hall of Famers on that squad. Between Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Ben Wallace, and Rasheed Wallace, they could easily have 4 Hall of Famers. Now, none of those guys are going to be first ballot Hall of Famers, But down the line, they could have 4 possible Hall of Famers on that team. That's like the Pistons from the late 80s. People thought, well, they didn't have too many stars on that team. But now we look back and we see they had Isaiah Thomas, they had Joe Dumars, they had Dennis Rodman, they had Mark Aguirre, who in my view should be in the Hall of Fame. And even Bill Laimbeer has an outside chance to get into the Hall of Fame. That guy was like a 4 or 5-time All-Star.
Even in the past, the Bulls won 6 with super teams, the Lakers won 8 with certainly super teams, the Magic, and then the Kobe Shaq super teams. The other 2 you can debate whether that's a super team or not. But in the past, it was usually that way. Nowadays, the Warriors had, I will say it again as I always do, Stephen A 73-win team, and then added an all-time great in his prime, an MVP in Kevin Durant. You must have a super team to compete with that. The Spurs playing the right way right now will get smoked even if they had Kawhi. You need a super team to counteract in this era.
Well, first of all, understand why the Golden State Warriors, and this is why I don't necessarily agree with Paul George, and I don't necessarily agree with you, Max. Understand that there's a difference between a super team and a team that has a few superstars. There's a difference.
I agree with you, sir.
Steph Curry is the greatest shooter we have ever seen. He is a superstar. Even though Klay Thompson is not a superstar, he is one of the greatest shooters we have ever seen in the history of basketball. And I tried to tell you this before.
And let me say this before I let Stephen A. Smith continue. That's why I contend that the 1990 Chicago Bulls were not a super team. Because I think that this is what Stephen A. Smith is trying to imply as well. That the Golden State Warriors were built in-house. They were built organically. Now, they happened to bring in one of the great players, one of the most talented scorers ever in Kevin Durant. But as Max Kellerman incessantly states, they were a 73-win team before Kevin Durant got there. So are they truly a super team, or are they just a team with superstars? And I've had people try to contend with me in regards to my assertion that the Bulls were not a super team. When you look back at that squad, they had the greatest player, in my view, of all time in Michael Jordan. They had another player in Scottie Pippen, who one could consider at that time being anywhere from the 10th best player in the NBA to as high as maybe even the 3rd best player in the NBA, depending on what you decipher and discern about his overall abilities and what he brings to the table. But that first three-peat team, that was not a super team. Horace Grant was a great role player, great low-post defender. He could make a mid-range jump shot. John Paxson was a great spot-up jump shooter. Bill Cartwright was a center that they pretty much got off the scrap heap, who Michael Jordan did not even want to join their team at first because they had to trade Charles Oakley to get him. Now, the second three-peat team for Chicago had unbelievable star power. Dennis Rodman was still a great impact player in regards to his defense and his rebounding, but he was not as multidimensional as he was with the Pistons. That team was truly galvanized by Jordan, and most of the players on that team were cast-offs. I see people try to claim that Ron Harper was a former 20-point-per-game guy. By the time he came to the Bulls, Ron Harper was not a 20-point-per-game guy. He was a player who the Bulls asked to D up on the opposing team's best perimeter scorer. If it was not Ron Harper, it was Scottie Pippen. Every once in a while, they would allow Jordan to guard the opposing team's best perimeter scorer, but they wanted to conserve Jordan's energy for offense. They would put Jordan on the opposing team's second or third best offensive player, and sometimes that would allow him to roam and help on defense, and he would still end up being one of the top 10 or top 5 players in the league in defensive efficiency rating. That's how their team ran. They were not a super team. They were not a team with unbelievable star power. And that's why every season, for the most part, during that time period, they only sent 2 players to the NBA All-Star game, Jordan and Pippen. And in '98, Pippen did not even make the All-Star team, nor did Rodman.
And I tried to tell America this yesterday. Yes, LeBron James is the best in the world. Yes, he's a superstar. But you better back up and recognize that Kevin Durant is off the chain.
Well, everybody knows that already.
You have to understand that when you're talking about Michael Jordan was a superstar. The Chicago Bulls were not a super team.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Stephen A. Smith. I hope that a lot of you guys that tried to give me a hard time when I did that video about how Michael Jordan hates super teams, I hope that you guys heard what this brother just stated, because he is correct.
Michael Jordan was a superstar. Scottie Pippen was an elite defender, okay? And you had the supplementary parts around them. But what they were
Scottie
going
Pippen
against...
way more than
hold
an
on,
elite
I'll let
defender.
you
Way
speak.
more than an
I'll
elite
let you
defender.
speak, zip it. The fact is, you're going up against
Can't get away
Clyde
with just calling him
Drexler.
an elite
Excuse me,
defender.
I sat there and let you speak. I let you speak about a sport I don't think you know much about. So listen to this. You got Steph,
Well,
you got
you
Clyde
think that
Drexler.
Scottie
That's
Pippen's
right.
an elite
That's
defender.
right. Excuse me.
That's
He
all
was an
he
elite
is.
defender? I didn't say that's all he was. Did I
He
use
was,
the word
but he's much
all?
I agree with you, Max Kellerman. You can't just limit Scottie Pippen to being an elite defender. Scottie Pippen was one of the top 3 defensive players of that era, and he would give you 20 points, 6 assists, and 6 rebounds on the offensive end. Scottie was phenomenal. In 1993, in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Knicks, he had an even better series from start to finish in regards to consistency on the offensive end than Michael Jordan. Jordan suffered from a series of wrist problems all throughout that season, and they would flare up and simmer down all throughout the playoffs. Jordan really only played up to his standards in 2 games in that series, that being games 4 and 5. But Pippen was consistently excellent on both ends of the floor in that series. Certain brothers get upset when I call him an elite level role player, but once again, that's not an insult. You can be an unbelievable player and just be a top level role player. Kevin McHale to me, Dennis Johnson to me, Joe Dumars to me, Dennis Rodman, those were top level role players. They were not superstars per se, meaning if the team lost, were they going to get the blame? No.
Oh, I did not use the word all. I did not use the word. But you
Finish
see,
your point.
no,
Finish your
of course, Max don't want nobody to finish this point because that's his definition of winning a debate, interrupting your point. I did not say all when it comes to Scottie Pippen. I said that Scottie Pippen was an elite defender. That was his primary role. He served in other ways. Clyde Drexler was a star, but not on MJ's level. Charles Barkley was a superstar in this league. Kevin Johnson was as well. But the...
Clyde Drexler was a superstar on the same level of a Charles Barkley. Some people might not understand that or agree with that. Please understand that Clyde Drexler led his team to 2 NBA Finals appearances in 1990 and 1992. Charles Barkley only led his team to 1 NBA Finals appearance in 1993, and he gave up a 3-1 lead to the Rockets in 1995. So by the early 90s, yes, Charles Barkley was a more impactful player than Clyde Drexler. But Clyde Drexler in the late 80s into the early 90s was a more impactful or just as impactful a player as Charles Barkley. Clyde Drexler is one of the most underrated players in NBA history.
The ultimate superstar that was Michael Jordan was able to overcome all of that. In the game of basketball, more so than any other sport, one superstar who is head and shoulders above a lot of people can do a lot of things. Could he win the series? Not against a team like Golden State. But he should have been able to get you 1 game.
I agree with you, sir. LeBron James was supposed to win at least 1 game against the Golden State Warriors if he's as great as Max Kellerman claims he is. Now, of course, many of the LeBron James Cinco fans, they'll say, well, that game was game 1. J.R. Smith blew the game. Look, it is what it is. LeBron James still had an overtime period to grab that game. Allen Iverson did it in 2001 against the 0-1 Lakers. He went into overtime and beat the Lakers. How come LeBron James couldn't do it? Instead, he was too busy having a mental meltdown on the sideline, would not even join his team in the huddle.
Because I watched AI get 1 game against Kobe and Shaq. Got 1 game. 1.
Stephen A., that's such a bad...
Beyond that, let me say this. In the 1989 Eastern Conference Finals, when the Bulls played the Pistons were by far the best team in the NBA. They would go on to sweep the Lakers in the finals. Michael Jordan was able to get 2 games against that all-time great Bad Boys team. In 1990, they were able to get 3 games. And that Bad Boys team, they were sweeping or beating every other team in like 5 games. And the Bulls in 1990 were able to take them to 7 games. So once again, LeBron James should have been able to at least get 1 game.
Bad point. When LeBron has enough, and it doesn't need to be as much as the Warriors, he beat the Warriors. He beat an unbeatable team with an
Don't get me
inferior
started with that
squad. What are you
stimulus
talking
package. I
about?
keep trying to tell Max. He keeps forgetting what I bring up about the stimulus package. They should have lost that series in 5 games. They should have lost it in 5 games.
Oh, shoulda,
They
coulda,
really
woulda. But
shoulda.
what actually happened? They won it in 7.
Well, we know.
We know what actually happened. What actually happened was Draymond Donkey Green made one of the worst decisions in NBA Finals history. LeBron James and his boy Brian Windhorst made sure that they let the NBA know about it. In addition to that, Andrew Bogut got his knee caved in by J.R. Smith. All of a sudden, Andre Iguodala's body started to break down on him in games 6 and 7. Steph Curry had a mental breakdown down the stretch of game 6 in Cleveland when it became abundantly clear that the NBA referees were going to make sure that the Cleveland Cavaliers took the series to 7. So many things happened one after another to let you know the NBA was going to make sure that they put their boo thang, LeBron James, in the best position to win that he could possibly be put in. And still, it took Kyrie Irving's magnificence down the stretch of that game to seal the deal.
Know that? There's a lot of things that actually happened, and you could ignore the facts that led up to it.
Guys, I have bad news. It's over. We don't have another hour.
Nah, I don't want to talk basketball with him.
Oh, you're done?
He's not on this level.
Bye, Max.
But anyway, that's it on that. We'll see what happens with this up-and-coming NBA season. But Paul George sounds like a broken person. That's what he sounds like. He sounds like someone who knows that he just happens to be playing in an era with an undefeatable team. And that happens every once in a while in various sports, not just in team sports, but also in single-person sports like boxing or tennis, where you have many other talented participants and they just know that the top-level performer in their particular sport is just dominant. But anyway, peace.